calm down. Thank you.
Hi everyone, it's been a little while. I'm sweaty. I immediately took my jumper off because it's 31 degrees Celsius. But you know, I gotta look cute while I'm sweating my brains out. I thought I would be checking in with you guys sooner, but a lot of stuff has happened. I think I'll save updates of that for another video because it's kind of stressful and sometimes sad. I went to the library the other day. When I go to the library, it's like, wow, I'm amongst everyone. There's so many opportunities for knowledge here. I don't know why, but it makes me feel really good. I picked up this book, Creative Demons and How to Slay Them by Richard Holman. I picked it up on a whim. I loved it. I'm going to share with you a chapter from this book that I think relates to how some of us will be feeling in about a month when the creative resolution glaze wears off, if you know what I mean. What I love about this book is that it personifies parts of the creative process that are not living things, but once you make them living things, they seem more tackleable, they seem more manageable. And that's what I loved about The Artist's Way too. I don't know if you remember me telling you about it, but the author would personify things like the censor, like your inner critic and stuff like that. This book kind of does the same thing. So if you've read The Artist's Way and you like it, you might like this book. The chapter I want to talk to you about today, it's called The Demon of the Blank Page, and I have a lot of notes. I think this relates to things like blank sketchbook anxiety and stuff like that. It's like you don't want to ruin the illusion that you created for yourself of like your dream project, dream life, la 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 la. So let me just read what I've highlighted here and some of the notes that I've written down for myself. The demon of the blank page strikes mercilessly with no regard for the dedication, ambition, or past achievements of his victims. If you choose to engage in a creative pursuit, sooner or later your paths must cross. Dylan Thomas was at the height of his fame, enjoying the kind of international success that few other poets had ever known. He became paralyzed creatively, writing just 6 poems in 6 years. Now, the author goes on to describe a lot of creators that have done the same thing. Harper Lee, who obviously wrote To Kill a Mockingbird, wrote one other book, and I think the manuscript was finalized before To Kill a Mockingbird was published. In a letter to his brother, Van Gogh wrote, "You don't know how paralyzing it is, that stare from a blank canvas that says to the painter you can't do anything. The canvas has an idiotic stare and mesmerizes some painters so they turn into idiots themselves." And if you're wondering whether a lack of inspiration can strike musicians, take a look at the list of the longest gaps between albums on Wikipedia. Basically, like all these iconic bands that you think of. Sometimes they created albums with 20 years gaps. I think we think because of social media, work is being created every day. People are making masterpieces every day, and that's just not the case. It's not reality, it's not realistic at all. The demon of the blank page has driven some of our most famous creators to the edge of despair, and in some cases beyond. No one is immune to his influence. The more you battle with him, the more desperate you become. And the more desperate you become, the harder it is to have a good idea. The next part of this chapter, they start talking about neuroscientists and the studies they've done into the brain. If you want to see the science behind it, he's written it here, but I'm not going to go into it. Just take my word for it or buy this book. Analytical thinking is a deliberate application of logic and reasoning. It's a top-down, ego-driven, conscious process where we bring all our experience to a given problem and follow a series of steps to arrive at a considered conclusion. It's the kind of thinking most often taught in schools. It's rational, methodical, and depends on the application of existing paradigms. Analytical thinking enables us to plug away at puzzling problems and solve them over time. Spontaneous thinking is a non-linear bottom-up process which takes place independently of conscious thought. When it comes to artistic epiphanies, this is where the magic happens. Whereas analytical thinking is linear, spontaneous thinking works in parallel and has vastly more processing power. When you're actively thinking, you only have so much energy to do that, but if you're thinking in the background or subconsciously thinking, thoughts can spread infinitely and then kind of eventuate to an idea that presents itself to you. We need the prefrontal cortex to help us decide whether our ideas are any good, but it's unlikely to come up with moments of genius itself. I wrote here, this is why it's important to split the creation and curation parts of the process. Ideally, leave space around each stage to let your brain transition from one state to another. As the demon of the blank page comes knocking and the vast imaginative void yawns before us, our first instinct is to double down on effort, to concentrate and to think harder, to activate our prefrontal cortex. And it's the worst thing we can do. And then I started writing, the blank page is just pressure. Other types of pressure for me are the bigness of a project. Things like book projects, when I sign a new contract for a large job, I overwhelm myself thinking, oh my God, this is such a big deal. This is such a big deal. When we signed my first book contract, I was like, this is going to change my life. This is really going to be legitimizing. This is going to be crazy. Chris is like, I think you're just going to have a book. Everything's going to be the same, but you're just going to have a book. And I was like, no. It's going to change my life. And then afterwards I was like, oh yeah, I'm the same, but I just have a book. By bringing the full force of our conscious, rational minds to bear on the problem, we're reducing our capacity for spontaneous thought. We're limiting the processing power of our brains and making an innovative solution less likely. They then go on to talk about Leonardo da Vinci and The Last Supper and how it's considered one of the greatest narrative paintings of all time. But despite the accomplishment of the final work, we know from accounts of Leonardo's life that the painting did not come easily. Each morning he would go out and he'd just walk among the flowers. He wouldn't start this painting. One of the friars went to the Duke who was commissioning the work and was like, he's not doing anything, there's no paint on the walls. And then the Duke confronted Da Vinci, and Leonardo replied crisply, men of lofty genius sometimes accomplish the most when they work the least. It says Leonardo understood something that many of our greatest artists, thinkers, and scientists have themselves discovered to be true. If you seek inspiration, you have to take time to step away from the blank page. After all, the word inspiration literally means to breathe in, to take a deep breath, to chill out. When we're tense, anxious, or fearful, our brain shuts down all but the essential functions we need to fight or take flight. I've already spoken before about how I feel like the algorithm is not good for finding inspiration because it's only feeding you what you've seen before. And therefore, if you only see what you've seen before, you're never going to progress. You're never going to grow. As soon as we stop actively hunting for inspiration, our neurological orientation shifts from the limited processing power of a rational thought to the far more profound, insightful, and powerful operation of our unconscious neural network. This is why those aha moments often happen when you're in the shower or washing the dishes or when you've just woken up. This has happened to me. I wrote Zoom in the shower, and a lot of my ideas come when I'm just giving myself the chance to sit and do nothing. I'm not suggesting that the demon of the blank page showing up is an excuse for you to lose yourself in Netflix. The kind of diversionary activity you undertake needs to be serene enough to allow your unconscious mind the space to do its thing. And this is also why I don't think social media is a good place to actively seek inspiration, because this is a zone that is constantly trying to hold your attention. And if your attention is there, your idle mind is not wandering, if you know what I mean. When Einstein was stuck with an intractable mathematical challenge, he would put down his pen and pick up his violin. Margaret Atwood observed, slow walking leads to rumination, which leads to poetry. And then I thought, is the demon of the blank page allergic to sunshine? Is it like mold? Unfortunately, our always-on digital lives don't allow much room for daydreaming and the fallowness of boredom. Making space and time for the ideas to find you is one of the most important things you can do if you seek inspiration. Get out of your own way, they say. When the ideas aren't coming, we blame ourselves. We become stressed, and the more stressed we become, the less likely ideas are to arrive. But what if we shift the emphasis from having ideas to receiving them? Now, this is something I found really interesting, and I'm really going to bring this into my practice. This is how the Greeks thought about creativity. You believed that your ideas came not from within, but from the muses. Your focus was not on squeezing another creation from your addled mind, but simply getting yourself into the right kind of relaxed mood for the muses to pay you a visit. My New Year's resolution for this year is space and creating space. And I think that's going to allow me to have these ideas, allow me to have more space for personal work, and allow me to be more creative even if I'm not making more hours of the day. I've written here that the challenging thing about being a professional creative, a commercial artist, or any other job title that links creativity to commerce is that efficiency and deadlines are involved. These add pressure and mean that it can be difficult to come up with ideas in the most purest form, in that we are switched off, we're relaxed, we're doing it. So we have to build those structures in for ourselves. I need to build that into my practice so that I have those pockets of creativity, then I have those pockets of making, and then I have those pockets of critique and curation. David Lynch, rest in peace, said, you don't make the fish, you catch the fish. Trillions and zillions of ideas, and they're all there just waiting to be caught. Phoebe Waller-Bridge, the creator of Killing Eve and Fleabag, says, I always feel as though the story is there, floating around in my peripheral vision. I just need to catch sight of it for a second. Rick Rubin says, ideas don't come from out of the blue, and they don't come merely from us. We're tuning into them, overhearing them, remembering them, and recognizing them. I actually love this philosophy of creative thinking, because not only does it cause you to prioritize putting yourself in a really creatively fertile mind space, which is just going to be healthy in the first place, it also takes the ego out of not having inspiration or not having ideas. I feel as soon as we turn it into something that we're doing consciously, we blame ourselves when it doesn't happen, if that makes sense. And there's a lot of shame that comes with that, and there's a lot of sadness and frustration that comes with that, and all of these feelings are things that are not going to allow us to have good ideas even more so. This kind of approach removes the conscious ego-driven self from the equation. Brian Eno describes the experience in his diary as being on the edge of the abyss. When he faces this unwelcome void, he leaves his studio, and even if a deadline is looming, he does something counterintuitive. He hurls himself into that abyss. He stops hunting for inspiration, and the moment he gives up the battle and cedes control is usually when his fortunes change. This is so interesting, because I don't do this, and I would love to try it. It's a bit risky, though. I feel I've spent a lot of my life using fear to motivate myself, or using fear to push myself to do things I don't want to do, but I know that are good for me. But all of this time fearing has been like not good for my mental health, and definitely not good for creativity, because then I'm like constantly stressed. Resisting the idea and inevitability of something going wrong, or more extremely the death of my loved ones, means that I'm not really prepared when actually things go wrong as well as I could be, because I'm so stressed all of the time. I'm not trusting that in the moment I will have the solution. In the moment I'm capable of coming up with these ideas, because I know that I am. I'm actually like doing the opposite, and I'm making myself less prepared to be able to problem solve on the fly. I've written here, how can we skip the worrying in my personal life and my creative life? What if, after all this, the demon of the blank page is still resolutely refusing to budge? There is one final stratagem you can employ to outwit him: start a different project. If you try something free of whatever strictures you're currently working to, you may surprise yourself. And I found that sometimes when I give myself this space, which I don't do a lot, I actually discover things that I can bring back into the original project that I was working on. If you're focusing on remember how we spoke about how like the processing power of like analytical thinking is less than the processing power of like subconscious spontaneous thinking? I feel that when you change into this new project that has nothing to do with the work that you're needing to come up with ideas for, the original project is pushed into your creative mind. The original project is pushed into the subconscious thinking mind, and with more processing power, you're more able to like come up with solutions in the background when you're doing something else. Andre Ackerman is a celebrated author of Call Me By Your Name. He was on a deadline to deliver a novel. One morning, just before breakfast, he found himself scribbling a few sentences in his journal about a house in Italy overlooking the sea. No more than a diversion before the real work began. Because Ackerman thought no one would ever read what he was writing, he was liberated from the ponderous self-editing that had been weighing him down on his commissioned novel. He was having fun. The sentences became paragraphs, and the paragraphs pages, and one of the most loved novels of recent years was born. Having an enjoyable, no-pressure B project, the kind of thing you can do for a short time each day, free of the burdensome expectations of your A project, is a great way to keep working in spite of the machinations of the demon of the blank page. Over time, you may even find that the hierarchy flips. The B project doesn't have to be a whole nother project. It doesn't have to be an art show or like a zine or a publication. It could easily just be working in your sketchbook in the mornings. It could easily be, using writing prompts to come up with ideas and things like that. It doesn't need to be this whole big thing that you're going to show to the world. It could just be a little personal project that no one needs to see, and that pressure taken away from knowing that no one's going to see it is why like working in a sketchbook privately with no stress and no fear that it's going to be the fuggliest thing you've ever seen is so important. You never know when this particular demon will appear in your path. No creative person is ever truly free of him. If you battle him, he will only grow stronger. Instead, accept this inevitable presence and know that you can always find a way around him, just maybe not the way you were intending to go. I wrote, what ideas have I lost to the blinders I put up when trying to reach a goal? It's no use regretting it now, but I worry that in all these years of fretting and being so hyper-focused on what the next deadline is, maybe I've lost some really, really good ideas. So in this year, I'm going to create space for those ideas and kind of follow those threads when I can, when I have time, and make time so that I do have time. This is from Tolkien, a biography by Michael White. So he had a routine. He would cycle up the road, he would go to his office, and he would sit down and like start marking papers, because he was a professor at Oxford. He was marking school certificate exam papers, and I think this was like an extra part of his job. He was taking it on as some extra work to earn some extra money for his household. It says here, marking school certificate exam papers, the work of 16-year-olds, is tedious and almost always boring, but it helps to pay the bills, and with a wife and 4 children to support, Tolkien needs to augment his professor's salary. Soulless as the work usually is, Tolkien takes pride in reading each piece of work carefully and pays attention to every detail. And so, for the next half hour, he concentrates upon a single manuscript. Occasionally, he scribbles a comment in the margin, and once in a while, he places a small tick at the end of a paragraph. He slowly turns the page, and all around is peace and silence, broken only by the visit of a bird to the window ledge and a light breeze brushing leaves upon the study window. After a while, Tolkien is satisfied he had judged the exam paper fairly and places it on the right-hand pile before plucking another from the pile to his left. For a further few minutes, he reads the opening pages of this new paper, and then, turning the page, he is surprised to see before him a blank sheet of paper. Pausing for a moment and feeling as though he had been rewarded for his day's labors, one fewer page to mark, he leans back in his chair and looks around the room. Suddenly, his eye is drawn to the carpet close to one of the desk legs. He notices a tiny hole in the fabric and stares at it for long moments, daydreaming. Then he turns back to the paper in front of him and begins to write. In a hole in the ground, there lived a hobbit. And that is the first line of The Hobbit. That makes me want to cry. Obviously, like, his whole life led up to this. He was always interested in, like, language. He was always interested in, like, why there wasn't, like, a mythology for England, I think. And he wanted to create that. I think he spent a lot of time writing stories for his children. I know that he wrote these very elaborate letters from Father Christmas to his children each year. All of those things contributed to the fact that he was able to, in this moment when inspiration struck, write this amazing book. I think it's not about doing nothing and waiting for inspiration to strike, because I think that's also as unproductive as trying to force inspiration from not being inspired. But I think it's about doing what like the ancient Greeks did in seeing inspiration as something that strikes you or that you're given the gift of once in a while, and preparing yourself for that. Preparing yourself could mean creating space for that, making time for that, coming to the park, going to the library. It could mean working on your practice, working on like your technical ability, knowing your medium, and making money and saving for like paper so that when inspiration does strike, you're ready. You know what I mean? Like there's so many ways you can prepare, but I think compartmentalizing inspiration away from your personal actions is like mind-blowing to me, and I'm really excited to try that this year. This year I want to make space for things, and that's making space for my personal life, making space for like when things go wrong, which they have already this year, making space for inspiration and for personal work, because I for the last several years have been really focused on commercial projects because it gives me a sense of stability. It allows me to like have a beautiful life with Rocket that I love, and with Tolkein. But now I think it's time to create more space because I'm at a threshold where I actually have no more time for it, and I really want to. Hello everyone. I had to move. One, my camera had started overheating. Two, this man who I felt was watching me like walked dead towards me from across the park, directly towards my camera, and then like pivoted, and then he sat like behind the tree that I was sitting on. Like then he moved so that he could see me. That's what it felt like. So I was just feeling a little bit uncomfortable, so then I moved. Then it was like a really windy day, and I was scared I was gonna get crushed by a tree. Call me dramatic, but it's very eventful. Anyhow, I'm in another park. It's very windy still, but I hope you can hear me. I just wanted to like give some final thoughts and stuff like that. I feel like this chapter has been really like eye-opening for me, not just because of what they were saying, but because of the conclusions I was drawing. Something that I noticed is I think that, or thinking about the creative masterpieces that have come before us, whether it be like art of any kind, writing, poetry, visual arts, film, anything, music, obviously. I think that contributes to the self-doubt that comes with kind of getting overwhelmed by the blank page or the unlimited possibilities and the fear of like messing up those unlimited opportunities and possibilities before they happen. I think if we think less about the work that was made and more about like the creatives that made them and how they also face these trials and tribulations just like us, I think that would make us feel like a lot more close to them. And when we feel closer to them, even though they're brilliant and we probably won't create anything that as good as what they've made because it is a different time, I think it'll help us like at least put pen to paper and stuff like that. Oh my god, it's so windy. I don't know why, but I've always worn this dress like on days it's extremely windy. So it's like always been like, ding. I'm always scared my like eyeliner will be imprinted into the shirt. I feel like the success of all of these works that we look up to and like love so deeply as like a society contribute to dehumanizing like the artist. And when we dehumanize the artist, we see them as like this icon or this like legend or mythical person. And we don't assign like these very human attributes of self-doubt or anxiety or procrastination and all of these things that make us us. And the bigger the gap we feel is between us and them, it makes us feel like, oh, they were made to make it and we weren't. Humanizing your idols will allow you to become more like them and give you a better shot at creating work similar to the work you love. Not necessarily like in style, but just in the way that it makes you feel. I also think about like through all this self-doubt and procrastination and like anxiety of the blank page and things like that, maybe these great works wouldn't have been made without those feelings, and maybe we need to just like stop resisting those feelings and kind of learn to sit in the discomfort of those feelings and try and separate them from our value, because if we're not feeling like it makes us a bad person or creative or hopeless or dumb or not cut out for it, I think that's when we can more easily sit in the self-doubt and be like, I'm not really feeling ready yet. What could I do to feel ready? Instead of being like, I'm not feeling ready. Oh my God, I'm not cut out for this. I suck. I'm not like everyone else. Everyone thinks I'm an imposter. Everyone thinks I'm like an intruder into this space. What I wrote here was perhaps the works wouldn't have been made without weathering the storm. Maybe the storm spun them a couple of times and sent them in a better direction. Maybe without the self-doubt or the time or the incubation period for the ideas, we would have not had those works at all. There's so much to this book that's so good. It kind of softens the fear around having these thoughts, feelings, struggles, things like that. So I really wanted to share it with you. As per usual, I'd love to hear from you, like what you guys think of this. You always get to hear from me long form. I love hearing from you long form. In my video on routine and rethinking routine, you guys had such good insights to like how you have worked around creating routine, and I've implemented them into my life and they have changed my life, even as little as like putting my laundry basket next to my bathroom instead of just like allowing myself to be tempted to throw them on the floor. It's been really nice. So I'd love to hear from you long form, any thoughts you have on this chapter, any thoughts you had if you've read this book. And yeah, I want to say a big thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video as per usual. If you don't know, Squarespace is an all-in-one platform for building your website. A big part of the creative process is the psychological part, and it's like something that you need to wrangle constantly. But I think like people see like art and they think that is the job. It's so fun, it's so chill, but there's such a big psychological wrangling that you need to do to keep yourself in check, that's invisible. And another thing that's invisible is like self-promotion and the business side of art, which is always linked if you want to do it as a job. If you don't have a website, I would really consider it. Having a portfolio is super important. It allows you to curate the fruits of your process. It allows you to tell a story, it allows you to connect with your audience, and it allows you not to rely on social media. It's really important. I've tried a bunch of website building platforms and this is my fave. It's simple, but it can be like complex enough that it doesn't look basic, if that makes sense. And everything is really easy to do. If you've never tried Squarespace, go to squarespace.com/furrylittlepeach to get a free trial and 10% off your first purchase. And thank you guys for watching. I'll see you soon. Cute.